Hey, how's it going? Welcome to mentfx. So this right here in front of you, these little rocks, these little circles, whatever you want to call them, are actually the reason that trading is very, very hard for a lot of people and why a lot of people really never make it anywhere in their trading careers. And I kind of want to cover them with you right now so that as you continue, you hopefully can get better and a lot quicker. Okay, so very simply, the way I want you to think about these rocks are as kind of independent concepts. Okay, so you start off as a trader. This is literally you, me, whatever you want to call it. And the problem that we all experience is there are close to 5 million, trillion, billion, whatever you want to call it, different ways to actually approach the markets. There's many ways to approach the markets, okay? You might have started in any discipline, it doesn't really matter, but there's many ways to approach the markets, okay? The one that I use is personally the one that I like the most because of course it made me the most profitable, made me the most money, and has proven, at least to me, through education of others, that it has built and brought profitability to a lot of other people. So what we're gonna assume is, we'll call this the, in this scenario here, the mentfx bubble, or otherwise known as trend following, structure following, proper structure, proper trend, right? Because as you guys know, I talk about this a lot of the stuff in the overall space actually teaches you structure very poorly, where you'll learn how to use structure and then all of a sudden you'll be taught to wait for this or wait for this or wait for this, and then you'll be taught to trade inside of this, to come back to the zone, to come back down, to make a new break, to come back to a zone, to come up, etc. Right? So this is what I call improper structure understanding, which is fine. It's a version of it that can work for you, but the mentfx way is basically to understand that we trade true trend, true structure, and that's where the education starts, right? So we're going to talk about this specifically in the mentfx sense of what you kind of learn here, but this is going to apply no matter what. So I want you to imagine that this is you, and I want you to ask yourself, okay, how hard, okay, is it to scale this rock? How hard is it to get on top of it? It might be a little hard, right? You'd have to put your hands on, you probably have to kick your leg up, and then boom, you get on top, right? And now you're on this rock. So you made your first step is what we can call it. Okay. Now, upon making that first step, what actually happens is you sit upon this little rock of understanding. And then what happens, and this is a very, very treacherous and scary thing, is that down here, okay, you have a very, very nice, a super nice, foam mattress, okay? And next to the foam mattress, you have snacks and steak and whatever else you guys like to eat, okay? So that's this little area down here. And that area actually represents another little rock, okay? It actually represents another potential little rock. So this could be another system. This could be the new algorithmic system. This could be the new 9:45 a.m. Trading system. This could be the new breakout system, whatever it might be. Okay, this represents that. So what tends to happen is that people take this step back down because, well, it's nice. There's a nice foam mattress, there's snacks, there's steaks, and it appears like you found some new grail, you've struck new gold, and as a result, you end up coming back to the guy here. And a lot of the time, most traders, this is actually 90% of traders, before quitting, end up in this little perpetual cycle right here. This is the cycle of close to everybody that's watching this video right now. If you just found this video, it's actually very likely you're in this cycle right here because you found me randomly, right? You haven't seen any of my stuff. You haven't learned directly from me. You maybe even learning from other areas. You maybe even have years under your belt, and all of a sudden you found yourself here. This is where a lot of people spend their entire trading careers until they quit. So most people end up quitting before they even reach, let's say, the next boulder. But what's interesting is, let's say you then decide to, okay, I'm starting to learn that the market moves through these fundamental ways of structure, through a fundamental way of trend. And all of a sudden you say, screw coming down to the nice mattress. I really want to know what's going on. And you make the leap, right? You jump, you barely grab onto this. Oh shit, almost fall. You kick yourself up, boom, you kick yourself up and boom. You end up on the rock. And this rock can represent another element of that concept, right? Another concept, but now where you take, for instance, the structural understanding and you turn it into an understanding of how supply and demand moves, right? How supply is formed, how demand enters, and how that actually formulates the rules for an actual move. So if a lot of you know, okay, down below on mentfx.com, this is course material specifically from the portal, as you guys know, but the underlying thing, and you can take notes on this if you want. So again, I don't mind sharing this for free. It's just I have it laid out very well within the course, within the team, because I want to teach someone kind of from the get-go to a professional how to think about the market. But this is underlying how a market moves, right? It creates and moves as a result of demand, through demand validation or supply validation. In this case, this is a game of supply and demand, and this is an example to the bullish side, where as demand validates, price really wants to move. And that starts the first mode for a structural delivery or for a trend-based delivery. It's just the problem now, once again, is that you can only get to this understanding if you allow yourself to key into and take that next leap or take that next step from an initial understanding that, hey, the markets are actually trend related. And sometimes it takes multiple of these things right here without quitting to make the assessment for yourself and see it for yourself that, hey, there actually is a conclusion that I can draw about the market in the effect that it actually moves in one direction. And oftentimes when that direction starts and you can pinpoint that direction and you understand how a market delivers, that direction and that delivery is so clean and perfect that you could now look for a position within it and basically hold on to it until it delivers to king the call, whatever, it just delivers beautifully. A lot of people stay in this loop forever until they find their first step where they're like, wow, this is actually phenomenal, right? I'm finally understanding that this is what creates moves. I'm no longer interested in taking the next, rapid jump, looking for the next potential course. And they make the jump to the next step of what might be a trend structural based approach, where they start to learn the concept that can be built upon it, almost like a house, right? You're constructing the foundation, you're laying the concrete, then you're laying the wood perfectly on top, you're perfectly isolating it, whatever it is, right? You're building that house properly from the bottom up. If you just try to pick up a house and drop it somewhere, it'll work, you'll have a house, but it won't be sturdy, right? And it will fall over and you will end up back in the bottom, right? So this is why, from an educational perspective, there are steps that are taken to actually ensure that there's a progression in terms of how you think, which is why a lot of people never get out of this little area here and they stuck in that loop forever. And the few that do still have a very likely chance due to the fact that without proper understanding, without proper education, you stand a very, very high chance of falling back down into comfort or finding yourself back into a new skill set, right? Because this nice foam or snack or steak does not have to just be a new concept or another way to approach the markets. This could be something happening in your life. This could be a new skill set that you want to learn. This could be a new job that you want to get. This could be a new responsibility that you're just going to start taking care of, and you start to forget more about trading. And all of a sudden, you find yourself back in this loop, right? And again, if 90% of people are trapped here, over time, right, if you start and you end up in any of these loops, right, where you don't kind of allow yourself to grow in understanding to the point where you have mastery, to the point where you can actually be profitable, you end up stuck with what we can call the percentage of people that fail, right? And that percentage is very high, of course, as it is in any skill set. It's just in trading, it seems a lot higher because unless you have the skill set mastered, you're not going to be making any money, right? Because trading is the only industry in the world where the work that you're doing does not mean a reward until the very, very end, because you can only start to actually reward yourself for the stuff that you're doing once your system is truly profitable and making money, right? Where every trade leads to a result that's going to grow the overarching equity curve to new highs and start making you actual money in your equity curve, right? But a lot of people never even get to that point because, well, it's hard, right? It takes a lot of time. So all of these rocks here kind of act as stepping stones of concepts within a niche, within a conceptual niche or an approach to the market that you're learning, right? And it's very important that if you're serious about this, that you look to stick to it, right? Because each one of these hold the treacheries of having to fall down and kind of restart and kind of have to go back and kind of reevaluate what you're doing. Otherwise, what happens is you might have that initial understanding, and this is kind of from my own personal experience of mentoring over 10 to 20,000 people over my overall educational career and making amazing traders out of it, and my personal trading having improved, right? What we start with is we start to see that, hey, prices do actually tend to move in structural trends, right? And as we understand that, we start to understand how that's layered with the movement of, for instance, supply and demand. And then we start to recognize how that supply and demand can be potentially viewed fractally across a number of timeframes, where if we have this happening, we can now watch for entries along these same entries that we saw here just inside of that area. So you start to learn how to overlap timeframes, and you start understanding how that same understanding of supply and demand is now used alongside that. Then you take that to the next level and you start understanding how that works even further across timeframes, and how we basically can start to buy stop versions of these or sell stop versions of these to get into very, very clean entries across a number of timeframes, because then we learn that these things occur within occurring larger supply and demand areas, right? So this is where you have overall structure. Inside of that structure, you have structure, and that structure breaks down. As it starts to break up, it starts to create supply and demand, and that supply and demand gives you actual real areas of entry without ever trading randomly back to random areas or breaking down or anything like that, and starts to make real moves, right? And this goes kind of hand in hand as I kind of look at this with some of the stuff I kind of showcase here. Now, again, this whole thing, as well as all the course material that goes with it, with real, proper understanding from the get-go to the very, very end, is actually available to all mentfx members, as well as the screener, as well as some other really cool stuff. So you can check it out below, but you don't need it, right? You can use this video itself to understand firsthand how you want to go about your learning. So please just stick to something and stick it through, because that's the only way you're actually going to find profitability. And you can see the same kind of examples here. Actually, maybe I can find some better examples for you guys. Yeah, so these are some of the examples I've been mainly working through recently. Okay, but basically you have those structural deliveries that start to occur across multiple timeframes, in this case on the 65-minute or whatever, and they lead to overall formations of demand, and within their new demand, and within their new demand, all of which produce an opportunity for an entry, which is actually one of the reasons I took this entry myself. Okay, but that is all still a buildup of an extra understanding to what's going on, right? So this is you taking those little leaps, and notice as you're taking these little leaps, they are easier and easier to take. They still might be hard, just like the initial leap to the first step can be a little bit hard, and then the next one's going to be a little bit hard, and the next one's going to be a little bit hard. They're able to be done because you have the prior understanding that you carry to each ongoing leap, right? Because this is how education truly works. This is how we've all been taught to actually learn. This is actually, if any of you that are in school, in college, graduated college, I graduated college myself, anyone that's done that has been through this, right? Where you don't learn the main thing you're going to college for, or the main things that your job is going to require. You don't learn the intricate things that you learned maybe in college or at a higher level high school course in elementary or middle school. It doesn't happen. You get preconditioned to understand how to think and then how to grow upon that thought. So instead of starting with, for any of you chemistry majors out there that have done like the whole, electron ring configurations or whatever they are, right? You don't always start with this. You start with a simple understanding of here's a gas, here's a thing, here's a solid. Okay, I don't actually remember the full education that I used to take in from this. It was a bad example, but you never start at the finale. You start at something that's very minuscule, something very small. You make that first step up, and then from there you grow an understanding, and you grow it, and you grow it, and you grow it. And that's exactly what learning the trade is going to be like. And it doesn't matter who you learn from. I want you to remember that. You can even learn completely for free online if you want. I'm going to continue to release, hopefully, very helpful content over the time of this YouTube career. If you're not part of the team or anything, you don't want a more kind of structure-based approach, that's going to do the same thing, where over time your understanding becomes a little bit better than the understanding that you had prior. And all of a sudden, right, as you make another tiny little climb to another point here, all of a sudden you have a full understanding of how you want to go ahead and trade an overall system. You start understanding that, there are a lot of points in time that you're actually staying out. In the times that you're staying in, you have a higher time frame, or a context time frame, as I call it, EVC, or you also understand how to think in time frames. You start understanding that you're only going to start looking at price when it's truly starting to make a proper stage 2, and then you can start watching in these areas for entries. And then what you'll do is you'll start to look inside of those areas on your validation time frames, on your lower time frames, for the actual proof that, validation or new stages are coming into the market, and then you look to take those higher through the entries within these areas, and those become your entry timeframes. And within those entries, you start to see proper buildups of what we call MBs, which are fractal supply and demand validation. So you start to look for buys just like this through a high, or buys through a high, and you look for price to basically, so something along the lines of this probably, right? And you look for price to do this, and you look to take the buy through that, or the buy through that, and then you look for that move right there as it validates itself. So as this move validates itself, you look for that to be the start of, hopefully, what you saw here, which would have been the entry around here, which leads to a proper delivery in price, which is a real trend, right? And then as everyone else around you is stuck wondering, how are they always in this? Why didn't they get in here or here? How are they, how are you in this? What do I do? How do I get in this? Instead, you start recognizing that this is not a time to get involved in a trend. The proper time to get involved in the trend is when the trend starts to begin to show you that it wants to make that move. And then that move's delivery is actually the work of what you did prior paying off. And then you look at your system and you're like, wow, I have a pretty good system. The system gets me into trends, keeps me in trends, keeps me out of really bad action. I don't trade all the action that's bad. I don't touch price at all. I don't show up every day. And you have the average kind of trader, the average person come to you and say, why don't you take a trade today? What's going on? Why don't you take a trade on this exact pair at this exact moment? How are you not taking trades? Why is everything so choppy? What do I do? And you're like, dude, your first step is to understand, right? Your first step is to understand that, one, there are conditions that create a good market to trade. And you don't even understand that there are conditions or there are markets that are in a condition that should be traded or shouldn't be traded. So your initial question of understanding why I didn't even touch something it's just lost, right? Because there's no foundation. There's no concrete laid down. Nothing's on the floor. So the point of this video is just to remind you that no matter how you go about your education going forward, you need to have some kind of understanding that the learning process is going to be very gradual. It doesn't have to be slow, but it's going to be gradual. And those graduals are going to build up to an understanding, right? So from the floor, if we were to draw out the floor, if I go like this very simply, make this really thick. If I draw the floor and I just draw it out in time like this, and I draw the top here, what you don't know is that after some time, this right here becomes the difference. Okay, this right here becomes the difference in your understanding to the average person that you will normally meet and see in any given space. And all of a sudden, the same kind of questions that you might pose now, how did you not trade today? How did you not get caught in all this chop? How did you not take 4 trades this given day? How did you just take 1 trade and had it play out? How did you know to get involved in this area here for this move? And then how did you stay in it? How were you managing this thing all the way through? How did you know when to break even? How did you understand when to manage your risk? How did you know to start watching for trades here, but not here? What about a higher time frame was the thing that stopped you? And if it did stop you, if it didn't stop you, why did you fully stay out of price here? And how was it? And why is it the case that when, there's a market that's just doing, something like this and you completely didn't trade it, how did you know? And again, all of that comes from now, what you would just view as your overall template for an entry, your overall template for management, your overall template for partialing, for taking it. And all of a sudden you start to notice the gap. So this is the gap right here. You start noticing the gap between where you are and the proficiency level you have and the profitability that you're finally starting to see because of the understanding you have versus the average person that has stayed in a loop, right, from either this area here or this area here or this area here. And what I can tell you is that about 90% of most traders, because of what I've seen personally as a mentor and just seen personally from mentoring over, a few 10,000s of people, okay, is that most people, before they ever get to any proficient level, quit or stop or stay in the loop around here, where they learn some conceptual framework to the market, they start working a little bit more, and they find themselves back within the nice foam in the mattress and the snacks and the steak and all the other fun stuff that comes with it. And they stay in this perpetual loop until they quit or die.